Hey, Ryan, I got a question for you.
What's that, Dan?
Yeah. If you had to prove you were human and not an AI or artificial intelligence in 5 minutes via only a text conversation, how would you do it?
Oh man. Wow, that's hard. So it makes me think of with AI, it makes me think of the technology that predicts human behavior. You know, with what they have now with sending you messages about, hey, you should buy this. It's like, I was just talking about this with a friend. Creepy. And so if they have the technology, they being the ethereal they, have the technology to predict people's responses, it seems like you would have to do something out of the ordinary, and
Right.
kind of outthink the machine, right? Oh my goodness, kind of vamping because I'm trying to figure out what I would do. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I looked at this question ahead of recording, and I was like, everything that I thought of, I was like, well, that would just be something that an AI would do if it was trying to pass, like they call this a Turing test, where
Yeah.
you know, if you can determine, is this a AI or is this a person that you're talking to?
Right.
And all of the techniques that I was like, well, that's gonna prove it's me. It would be something that an AI would learn to pass a Turing test.
It's like a situation of like the body snatchers sort of a situation.
Mm-hmm. I think the closest thing that I landed on for an answer is I have heard, and I don't know if this is true, so I might end up dead if I fail this test or whatever. I have heard that computers have a hard time parsing pronoun dense text because it's hard to figure out, like, if I use the word he several times in a sentence, but I'm talking about two different people. I've heard that it's hard for a computer to figure out, like, track the logic of the sentence because it's the same word. It means two different things. It's referring to two different people.
That's smart. That's super smart.
I don't know if that's true. And like, I've just vaguely pulled that out of the periphery of my memory. But I think that I would try to, like, if I'm texting back and forth with someone, like, almost tell like a story or something, but then start using pronouns like he, she, they, whatever, to refer to the characters in the story in a way that, like, would be confusing, but that if you're a human, you can kind of intuitively figure out, like, what's going on because, you know, the human mind can pick up on stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, like, if you try to do something that's out of the ordinary, for instance, my wife and I, when we text back and forth, I just, if she says hi, I'll just say hello. It's not anything like, hey, babe, or whatever. So if I took that and I went in the opposite direction, like, hey, girl, or whatever, and spell it like a Gurll.
The only valid way to spell girl.
Oh, absolutely. If I did that, I thought to myself first, like, oh, hey, that might be an indication that this is me. I'm trying to outsmart the machine. But then I'm thinking from the other side, where it's like, if I receive a text like that, I'm like, okay, this can't be them, right? This cannot be who that is. So I think I have an answer.
Okay.
I'm horrible at responding to text messages. I'm really bad at communication over the internet. So I think in order to prove it's me, I just don't respond for the next week. They send me a message and I just don't say anything back, and they're like, okay, that's definitely him.
That is for sure. I literally just had a picture of my brother who is the exact same way. Like, if you text him, you're probably not going to get a response. So like, if I need an immediate response from him, I have to text his wife.
Oh,
because she will relay the message and she will respond.
Yep, that's how it is.
So no, that's a really good answer, I think. Yeah, that's really good. I like that a lot.
How to outsmart the machine? Just ignore the machine.
Right. The only way to win the game is to not play.
There you go.
That's awesome.
So we have another theme for this week, as we do with every one of our episodes. Would you like to introduce the theme this week, or shall I?
Yeah, I can introduce the theme this week.
Today's theme.
So this week we are looking at the idea of devotion. And Ryan, you're the one who kind of suggested that theme or brought that up. When you think of the word devotion, what comes to mind for you?
When I think of devotion, honestly, I think of my dad. My dad is a wonderful example of this. Somebody who is, no matter how frustrating a situation gets, he has the attitude of, I'm going to get this done because I know it's the right thing to do. And he works extremely hard for his family, and he was somebody that I looked to. Like, he was involved a lot with the church and stuff, but he did things that nobody asked him to do. He just knew it was like, this is something that needed to get done, and so he was the example to me of like, this is my job. I know this is something I need to do, and regardless of what anybody is thinking or telling me to do, I'm going to do it. So
yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I looked it up on dictionary.com. Their definition of devotion was profound dedication, consecration, earnest attachment to a cause, person, etc. So yeah, it really ties into exactly what you said. It's about that dedication, that commitment, that almost single-minded focus on, this is the right thing to do. I need to do this.
Like, for instance, I'm devoted to Krispy Kreme. Like, everything about my life revolves around just getting that next donut and shoving it down my gullet. That is my life's calling.
Oh okay, Ben. So yeah, we actually have another example this week of a character or a person who embodies the theme of devotion, which we will do in this upcoming segment of...
Look at this guy.
So in this week's segment of Look at This Guy, we are once again revisiting a fictional character. So we've kind of alternated back and forth. I don't know that we'll do that every week, but that's how it's worked so far, 3 episodes in. And this is the first time we are not talking about a human character or like a person. I know we talked about a hobbit the first week, so that's not really a human.
Yeah, it's close. It's close.
Yeah, human adjacent. This character is not human adjacent. It is a fictional character, and it's a character from my favorite book of all time, which is Watership Down. And it is the character of Bigwig from Watership Down. So I'm expecting a lot of the audience out there probably doesn't know what Watership Down is or who Bigwig is or anything like that. So let me tell you, Watership Down is a book set in England in like the 70s when it was written, and it's about a bunch of rabbits. And they're not like man-sized rabbits. They're just rabbits.
Not like Bugs Bunny.
No, they live in the English countryside. The whole book takes place in like a 4 square mile little radius, but it is an epic adventure story that really has a lot of similarities to something like The Lord of the Rings or fantasy stories, even though it's about rabbits in the English countryside. It's one of my favorite stories. And the character of Bigwig specifically really emphasizes this idea of devotion, because the part of the story I'm going to be talking about is right near the end. It's like the last 60, 70 pages of the book. And so basically what's happened is this group of rabbits has gone on this grand adventure to find a new home. And they've fallen in with different traps and villains and heroes, and they've made their way to this home on Watership Down, which they're finally safe. They're finally home. They've had a lot of adventures. One of those adventures has been basically jailbreaking some people out of a nearby rabbit warren called Ephrafa, because they needed basically does or female rabbits to keep their warren going. So they stole them from this place called Ephrafa. Now, there's a few things you need to know about Ephrafa. Number one, it is basically an unstoppable army. It is like a militarized, super organized, super strict rabbit warren. And unstoppable, they are the most renowned fighting rabbits and tracking rabbits in the land. They are led by a military genius named General Woundwort, which is a great name.
Say that again. You broke up there for a second.
Oh, sorry. They are led by a military genius named General Woundwort, which is a great name for a villain.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Not only is he a military genius, he is also the fiercest, toughest rabbit that anyone knows of. He is huge, he is mean, and he is in charge.
So
because in rabbit...
He'd be like that bunny that you'd see at the fair, like that's basically the size of a toddler.
Yeah, just a giant mean, like he fights cats and foxes and wins.
Wow, okay, cool.
And so, because in rabbit culture, he's in charge, because in rabbit culture, the biggest and the toughest is always the leader. Because if you're the biggest and the strongest, you just make everyone else follow you. So he is in charge. And he has one mission. And that mission is to get revenge on the rabbits that stole people from his warren. And he has assembled a military army to come march across the English countryside with one job, and that is to kill these rabbits. And so it's dark times. All hope is lost. But the leader of the rabbits, Hazel, comes up with a plan. And he's like, all right, I think we might have a chance at this. Basically, I'm going to take some other rabbits. We're going to go get help. But we need someone to hold this army off long enough for help to arrive. And he gives that task to Bigwig. He says, Bigwig's name is pretty literal. There are two defining characteristics of Bigwig. A, he's big. And then B, he has like a knot of fur on top of his head that looks like a wig. But he's the biggest, strongest rabbit they have. And he says, okay, you have one job. All right. Get all of the other rabbits who are staying here underground, bury them in this back chamber where there's one tunnel that goes in there. And you just need to hold out for as long as possible until we can come back with help. And so that's what he does. Bigwig buries himself in this super narrow tunnel. There's not even room for him to turn around. It's just a narrow tunnel. And the others go off for help. And then General Woundwort and his armies break in. And so they dig into the tunnel, and they're looking around. They're like, where is everyone? And General Woundwort's like, all right, clearly they're hiding back here. We're going to go get them. So he goes into the tunnel. Bigwig kind of catches him by surprise. And again, General Woundwort is gigantic.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is they start biting and clawing at each other in this tunnel, and it's so close quarters, like they're just like face to face fighting each other. And General Woundwort like bites him and they kind of claws at him, and Bigwig claws at him. But eventually General Woundwort starts pushing Bigwig back because he's just so much bigger. And so he like stands up on his back legs and just pushes him, and Bigwig slowly just starts sliding back and back and closer to the chamber where all of the other rabbits are hiding.
Mm-hmm.
And right behind him, one of the other rabbits is like, Bigwig, you're not going to make it. Like, swap out with me. Like, you back up. I'm fresh. I can go in and fight him. And Bigwig's like, no, if I back up, he's going to follow me in here and he's going to kill all of you. Like, at the very least, if I can die in this tunnel, then my body blocks it. And they have to dig around me. They have to pull me out. So at the very least, I'm going to die in this tunnel to buy you guys some time.
Wow.
And then eventually, like, he's just so stubborn that General Woundwort's like, all right, I can't get past him. And he backs out. He's hurt. He's bleeding. He goes out and his commanders are like, wait, what just happened? Like, our general didn't win. And he's bleeding. And what is going on?
Wow.
And so General Woundwort kind of has to save face. And he's like, all right, yeah, I loosened him up. Why don't you guys get in there? And they're like, no.
No, we're not doing that.
For sure not. And then eventually General Woundwort realizes, all right, I've got to go in there and finish him off. And so he turns around in the chamber to go back into the tunnel. And I'm just going to read this next part right from the book.
Perfect.
So it says, once more, General Woundwort climbed on the earth pile. Then he stopped. His commanders, raising their heads to peer past him from behind, saw why. Bigwig had made his way up the run and was crouching immediately below. Blood had matted the great thatch of fur on his head, and one ear, half severed, hung down beside his face. His breathing was slow and heavy. "You'll find it much harder to push me back from here, General," he said. With a sort of weary, dull surprise, Woundwort realized that he was afraid. He did not want to attack Bigwig again. He knew with flinching certainty that he was not up to it. And who was? Who could do it? No, they would have to get in by some other way, and everyone would know why. "Bigwig," he said, "we've unblocked a run out here. I can bring in enough rabbits to pull this wall down in 4 places. Why don't you just come out?" Bigwig's reply, when it came, was low and gasping, but perfectly clear. "My chief rabbit has told me to defend this run, and until he says otherwise, I shall stay here." "His chief rabbit?" said one of the commanders, staring. It had never occurred to Woundwort or any of his officers that Bigwig was not the chief rabbit of his warren. Yet what he said carried immediate conviction. He was speaking the truth. And if he was not the chief rabbit, then somewhere close by, there must be another, stronger rabbit who was. A stronger rabbit than Bigwig. Where was he? What was he doing at this moment? Woundwort became aware that his commanders were no longer behind him.
Ooh.
And
Wow.
that is my favorite part of that story, because just Bigwig's devotion to what his chief rabbit told him to do. Now, his chief rabbit was not the biggest and the strongest. They were the only rabbit warren where, Bigwig should be the chief, but he's not, because he is committed to the leader. He recognizes that, being a leader means more than just being the biggest and the strongest.
And what made Hazel was the leader of that warren, right? What made him the leader?
So Hazel as the leader, what really makes him a good leader is that he listens to the people that he is leading. Like, there are different rabbits. There's Fiver and there's Dandelion, there's Blackberry and all sorts of rabbits. And they all have different strengths. Like, Fiver's kind of like a prophet, like he can almost kind of see the future a little bit. And Dandelion is super fast and a great storyteller, and Blackberry is really smart and clever. And Bigwig is, experienced with being in the army and stuff like that. And so when it comes to a dangerous situation, Hazel doesn't just decide, this is what I'm going to do, everyone else better follow me. He starts asking for opinions, and he gets the best idea, and he's not afraid to admit, yep, that's a better idea than I could have come up with. And because of that, he inspires loyalty in his rabbits, because they recognize, this isn't just some guy just some rabbit who is going to make us do whatever he thinks. He trusts us to also, provide our feedback, and he trusts that everyone's a team. Everyone has a part to play. When they go off and go get help, which is a dog from a nearby farm that they lure in there. He takes the really fast rabbits with him, and their part is to lure the rabbit. And Hazel basically...
or lure the dog?
Lure the dog from the farm. And Hazel basically, his job is to kind of almost give his life and kind of sacrifice himself for the other rabbits to be able to make it.
Wow.
So the willingness to sacrifice, and it's a willingness to listen and respect others that kind of inspires that loyalty and devotion.
And then you see it in Bigwig, it's reciprocal. It goes both ways. That's awesome. That story's so cool. Yeah, so I would really encourage, if you have not read Watership Down, read it. I know there are a couple of film adaptations. I have not watched either or any of them, so I don't know how good they are, how true they are to the story. But the book is well worth your time. Wow. All right. Absolutely. That's a really good one. Well, and now a word from our sponsors.
Dad Joke Corner.
Hey, Daniel.
Yeah, Ryan.
I lost my job at the bank on my first day. A woman asked... Yeah, I know, right? A woman asked me to check her balance, so I pushed her over.
Ryan, as things are getting tough here, I have a friend who keeps saying, cheer up, man. It could be worse. You could be stuck underground in a hole full of water. I know he means well.
He means well. Oh, man.
This has been Dad Joke Corner.
Preparing you for the future. Awesome. Well, going with our story about Bigwig and Watership Down, we have something to talk about in our next segment called
Here's Why You're Wrong.
That's right. Here's Why You're Wrong. And our quote today in our discussion about Here's Why You're Wrong comes from, or is attributed to, Vladimir Lenin. Says this: to rely upon conviction, devotion, and other excellent spiritual qualities, that is not to be taken seriously in politics.
Okay.
Why is Lenin wrong?
Well, Lenin is wrong for a variety of reasons.
Yep. This could take a long time, but we're going to try and narrow
historically
it down.
Speaking, if you live in America, you probably think Lenin was wrong. But
in this, let's just separate to this quote alone.
Yeah. So in this particular quote, it's interesting because Lenin says, like, conviction, devotion, those are excellent spiritual qualities. They're not to be taken seriously in politics. So it's almost as though, like, we're supposed to envision politics as, like, the anti-spiritual thing.
Like a separate entity.
Yeah, it's, like, totally separate. And all of the things that are very good over here in the spiritual or religious world have no place in politics, because this is, like, where real men do real work to really accomplish things. And, like, spiritual stuff, yeah, that's fine over there, but don't bring that into the politics or the real world, quote unquote.
It's like leave your stuff on the playground, don't bring that into the schoolroom.
Right. And that is so dismissive of like the value that conviction and devotion have.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those aren't, like, it's not conviction or devotion if you can leave it behind. Like, if your conviction is something that you can just turn off when you go to work or when you engage in political discussion or whatever, it's not really conviction.
Right. There's no guide there. See, when I looked at this, my first thought was, when we're talking about politics, what is the goal in just politics in general? It's to achieve power, because you can't enact your vision or what you want to do if you don't achieve power, and you do that through politics and all that. But here's the thing about power is, once you get it, if you do not have a guiding force, you are going to end up being corrupted by it and using it incorrectly or selfishly. This is going to be for another episode at some point, but Daniel and I have had many talks about power, and the best thing you can do with power is give it away. But hold on to that little tidbit for another episode.
That one's free.
Yes. So is this one, actually. But in politics, if you don't have a moral guide, you're going to use your power for selfish use. You're going to abuse your power. If you have devotion to a cause, if you have something that is guiding you, it at least makes it so that way you're not flip-flopping. Because let's say we're in talks with another nation, and they come along and say, like, hey, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, and you got some underhanded dirty deals that are going on. If you have power and you see an opportunity for yourself to advance whatever you want, then there's nothing holding you to, like, a moral code that says, that's wrong, and even if this benefits me, I'm not gonna do it. Right? There's nothing really there as a buffer. And so you're going to be put in a position where it's like improvement of your position over the quality of the people's lives that you're governing. And if you follow what Vladimir Lenin has to say here, if you leave all of your devotion, conviction, and spiritual qualities at the door, absolutely, every time you're going to sacrifice the quality of the lives of the people under you for your own sake. That's just how it's going to be.
Right. Yeah. We are, as human beings, as a rule, we are always like guided by something. Mm-hmm. And if it's not something bigger than ourselves, it is just going to be ourselves. And it's going to be selfish. Right. And that's why we need devotion to something outside of ourselves to shape that.
If you want to be a leader, you need to be the first to serve those who are under you. We see that through Hazel, like you were talking about. And we see that also through Bigwig, because he was protecting the people behind him. So if you really want to be a leader that inspires people, you need to be like that.
I agree.
All right, let's bring some levity to the situation. We got ourselves another one of our
debates from the annals of history.
All right, we got a spicy one for you guys today. We kicked it off with what was the first one? Oh yeah, it's a hot dog, a sandwich. Then we followed it up with dropping soap. Does it make it dirty or does it make the dirt clean? This one's even better.
And I'm pretty sure, like those listening at home, I'm 2-0 in these debates.
I do not think that's the case by any stretch of the imagination. Mr. I brush my face with my backyard dirt over here. I don't care about your charcoal. So today's is awesome. Today's question is that we're going to be debating: is a bucket a cup?
Yeah. And I just want to say, coming right out the bat, yes, a bucket is a cup.
Wow.
Anything that holds liquid is a cup if you have the courage to drink from it. Okay?
Wow.
If you've got a big old bucket, it could be a 5-gallon bucket, could be a mop bucket, whatever it is, as long as it's clean. And I'm gonna put a little asterisk here. Don't use like the gross garage like dirt bucket. Clean it out. Okay? You need to clean it out. But anything that like a bucket, it's a cup if you drink from it. Because that's what a cup is. You just drink from it. That's as clear as it can possibly be.
So wait, based on that definition, if you're saying, so you know how when you go to the store and get those styrofoam plates that they have that little ridge over the top, you're saying if I put water so that it covers the surface of that plate and drink off of that plate, that is now a cup?
Yeah, Ryan, I didn't think it was too hard to understand. Like I spelled it out pretty clearly.
So you're saying plates are cups is what you're saying here.
If you have the courage to drink from them. Now, I say, are plates good cups? No, they're not good cups, but they are cups. But we're talking about buckets here. We're talking about buckets, and a bucket.
Right. No. I understand we're talking about buckets here. Let me get to this. I'm just saying, nobody calls. If you said that a plate can be a cup, but nobody calls a plate a cup because it's not a cup. It's a plate.
No one drinks from a plate because they're cowards.
We name these things for their primary uses. I name it a plate. A plate is something that I put food on, or whatever, and I eat off of it. Or maybe if I have what are those things called? It doesn't matter. My point is, it's a plate because that's its primary use, is a plate. A bucket is not a cup because its primary use is not being drank water or whatever it is out of. We don't drink out of buckets on a normal basis. We carry things in buckets. You can use it as a cup. I will concede that point. You can use it as a cup, but it's not actually a cup. It's a bucket because it's named for its primary use. If I say, hey, go get me a cup, nobody's bringing me a 5-gallon bucket. They're bringing me the My Little Pony cup they have sitting in their cupboard right over the sink, and that's not from personal experience.
Okay, yeah. First of all, how dare you expose the fact that all of us have My Little Pony cups, Ryan? That's not. I didn't think we were going to put each other on blast like that, but apparently we are.
I'm gaslighting over here.
Yes, you can use a bucket as a cup, okay? So when you are using the bucket as a cup, guess what? It's a cup because you're using it as a cup, and therefore it becomes a cup.
Okay, I could pour liquid into a tire. I could take the rubber tire off of a wheel well, and I could pour liquid in there and drink out of it. It doesn't make it a cup.
But if you're using it as a cup, it has become a cup.
No, it hasn't. It's still a tire.
But you are using it. You said that things are named for their function.
No. Their primary use, not their function.
Okay, but their primary use is the primary function that an object has.
Okay.
So, but just because something is primarily identified with a certain function does not mean that's the only function it can have. And if we find another function that it also serves, I think that the name for that thing in that particular instance also applies.
So we're just living in the land of subjectivity now, that everything's name changes depending on its use?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, man. So basically what you're saying is most people's treadmills are actually clothes hangers.
I think that's a valid point to make. Because that's what your function that you're using it for.
Oh, so it looks like we're at a deadlock on this one. We're going to rely on you, the audience, to tell us who's right, who's wrong, what do you think, is a bucket a cup or not? In the future, we're looking for great guests, judges, to help us decide on these great debates, as well as other competitions we have planned. So if you're interested in being featured on our future segments, send us an email with the subject line guest judge, and we'll try to coordinate an appearance.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Assemblymen Podcast. You can find our episodes on YouTube, Podbean, and SoundCloud. Just search for the Assemblymen Podcast. If you have any feedback, topics you'd like us to discuss, or questions you'd like us to answer, please email us at theassemblymenpodcast@gmail.com or connect with our Facebook page at facebook.com/theassemblymenpod. We'd love to hear from you and continue the conversation.
Also, if you like what you heard and believe in what we're doing, please leave us a rating or a review in your podcast platform of choice. And if you know anyone who might enjoy listening, feel free to share us with a friend. That really helps us grow our audience and means we get to welcome even more awesome people into the assembly.
So Ryan, what did we learn today?
Well, I at least at the end there, I learned that most people's treadmills are actually clothes hangers, based on your description of the bucket and cup situation. So take that for what it's worth. But I also realized, and I learned today, that I really want to be a rabbit some days. That would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, all they do is eat and poop, basically. So
block up tunnels with their bodies.
And in the midst of a quarantine, that's about all I'm doing these days. Also,
what did you take away from today's episode?
Yeah, I learned that it's important to have a guiding principle, something to be devoted to, something that's bigger than yourself that you can fall back on in times of uncertainty or danger. And I also learned that in certain debates, it's really easy to fall back on subjectivity because once you go to subjectivity, there's basically no way you can lose.
Exactly. You can just change the definition anytime you want. So anyway, we thank you so much for listening, guys, and we will see you in the next episode. Goodbye.
Bye.